week we talked about the true worship service. What makes a worship the true one? Jesus began a conversation with a Samaritan woman over an everlasting water. And this dialogue moved on to the question of true worship, as we talked last week. The woman thinks that the place the question of where to worship, the place makes the worship true and acceptable to God. But Jesus teaches that it is not the matter of where, place, but the matter of who that makes a worship true one. The conversation over the true worship actually is about the question of who is Jesus. That is, the key element in true worship service is to know who Jesus is and experience Him in our daily lives. Today, we are going to talk about a true faith. So it's a kind of a serious theme that we're talking about true worship, true life, and true faith today. Let me tell you the outline of today's story. When Jesus revealed His identity of the Messiah, when He said, yes, this is, who's the Messiah? Are you the Messiah? And when Jesus said, and when a woman asked like this, and Jesus answered, yes, I am the one, the Messiah. So He revealed His identity. Then His disciples who went away to get some food came back to the village. And then the women went into a town and told everyone about Jesus. And when she went out to the townspeople, she said, "Hello, come. See a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ, the Messiah?" She delivered the news to the townspeople. And when the townspeople heard that, they all came out to the well, Jacob's well, to see Jesus. While townspeople, the people were gathering, Jesus told His disciples that He was doing the will of God. So that's what Jesus told while the Samaritan woman and the Samaritan village people were not yet arrived. It's not arrived. So here Jesus talks about doing the will of God. And doing God's work means to help people know who Jesus is and help them believe and help them welcome Jesus as their Messiah, the Savior. Many Samaritans believed in Jesus when they heard what the Samaritan woman told. So the Samaritans invited Jesus to stay 2 days more with them, and they listened to Jesus, and then they believed in Jesus. So this is the outline of what happened today. Today's episode shows us how the response of the Samaritan townspeople changes. Firstly, in verse 29, the Samaritan woman goes into the town to tell people about Jesus. And she says, in verse 29, she says, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be this Christ? Could this be Christ?" the tone of her message here, could this be the Christ? She's not saying, look, here's the Christ. But she says, could this be the Christ? So the tone of message is a little bit hesitating. She thinks that Jesus is the Messiah, but at the same time, she is doubtful if he is really the Messiah or not. So that's why she says, could this man be Christ? And she tells the reason why she believes that he can be the Messiah. She says, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. So that's why she thinks that Jesus is the Messiah. Why? What's the reason? What's the reason that made her say, could this be the Christ? It is because Jesus knew about her past. That is, she tells, look, this man knows my past. He knows everything, what I did. So, he is the Messiah. He is the Messiah because he knows my past. The Samaritan woman's confession at verse 29 is doubtful and not confident. Why? Why it is not full of confidence, but unsure and doubtful? It is because her confession is based on her experience, a quite simple supernatural thing. It is just because Jesus told about her past at first glance. Why she thinks that she is Christ? Because he knows my past. It's quite simple. A confession based on the experience of supernatural thing is unreliable. In the previous part of this episode, we discussed that there is a parallel between Jesus and the women. That is, Jesus talks about the heavenly spiritual things, but the woman talks about earthly and visible things. Do you remember that we talked about? So Jesus tells the spiritual things, the everlasting, eternal, unthirsty, everlasting water, but she thinks, water, mysterious water, that's very good water. So it's kind of parallel. Here again, she puts her face upon the mysterious experience. She's still here. Jesus talks about the spiritual thing, but she is remaining on this word. So, accordingly, her faith is based on her experience of visible thing. He is Christ because he knows. He has a special power to know my past. Like Buddha. What is the difference between Jesus and just the Messiah and the Buddha? Oh, he knows my past. So he is Christ. However, this kind of faith can not lead us to the true and reliable confession. Rather, it results in a doubtful and uncertain confession, like her. Like she's saying, could this be the Christ? She's hesitating. She's not sure. then what is the true confession? Hearing the Samaritan woman, many of the townspeople believed in Jesus, says in verse 39. And verse 39 reads, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So firstly, when the townspeople heard of Jesus from the Samaritan woman, oh, maybe he can be the Messiah. The first response of the townspeople to the woman's witness is that they believed in Jesus, like in verse 39. But it functions only as an inductor, what leads people to be more interested in Jesus and talk with Jesus by themselves. That is not the end to the townspeople. They go one step further. The Samaritans invited Jesus, and they themselves listened to Jesus. It was a personal experience. It was personal experience. And this produced true belief and confession. Let's read verse 42. In verse 41, and because of his word, many more became believers. They said to the women, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. The Samaritans came toward Jesus when they heard from the Samaritan woman about Jesus. So they listened to Jesus for themselves. And then, later, they say like this, now we believe in Jesus. We learn that Jesus is the true Messiah, the Savior of the world. Not because of what the woman said, but because we now ourselves experience Jesus. When they heard the woman's story, they believed in Jesus, but it was not true belief. The Samaritans invited Jesus, and they themselves listened to Jesus. They invited Jesus. They wanted to listen to Jesus more. Probably it says that they spent 2 days more. So for 2 days, all the townspeople were gathering, and they listened to Jesus. And they stayed with him, and they experienced Jesus for 2 days. And then they said, like in verse 42, the true faith and true confession is made only when people meet Jesus in person. It is not by a miraculous and supernatural experience. This kind of experience can lead us to the gate into the true faith and confession, but it is just a guide to the gate. And the true faith is only possible. It's only possible when we encounter Jesus in person in our lives. If you want to be a true believer, if you want to have a true faith, not by others, but yourself, we ourselves should meet Jesus in person. It's a one-to-one relationship. No one else can be interrupted. No one can be between us, me and Jesus. if you want to be a true believer, if you want to have a true faith, we need to meet Jesus. Like the Samaritans who spent 2 days in person with Jesus. Likewise, we need to be Jesus. We need to be with Jesus in person. Well, I do not want to ignore the miracles happenings, some emotional experiences. Yeah, that's true, and that is important as well. And those experiences can bring us to Jesus, but that is that. That can lead us to face Jesus. But just facing Jesus is not enough for us to have salvation. If you want to have a true faith, if you want to have a salvation, I mean everlasting life, facing Jesus is not enough. We need to welcome Him and talk to Him and have a conversation with Him and believe Him. Just sitting with Jesus is not enough. Those emotional experiences or supernatural miracles things can help us sit one-to-one with Jesus, but that's not enough. We need to know this kind of things. These kind of things cannot make us have true faith and true confession of Jesus. The true faith, the true confession of Jesus is made when we meet Jesus and know Him in person. Person to person. I do not want you to rely on some wonders and miraculous things in your life. Of course they are important and they are precious as well. But that is not enough. That is not the end. They can help, but they are not the end. They are just means that lead us to meet Jesus. And the true and confident confession and faith can be made when we meet Jesus in person. If you want to be a true believer, if you want to have a true faith, that brings us to salvation, then we need to meet Jesus in person. Nobody can do this thing instead of us. Just me and just you yourselves should do. I cannot help you. I cannot make you do. I cannot give you this to you. Only you need to meet Jesus, and then Jesus will give it to you, the everlasting life. And everlasting, on Thursday, the life-giving water is flowing from Jesus. So I want you to have a week meeting Jesus throughout the week. So this is the word of God for us today. Amen.
Amen.